Time. For most people, it consists of nothing more than a mechanical ticking trapped inside wristwatches, squeezed between the hour and minute hands. People measure time. They carve it up into pieces. They divide it into seconds, minutes, and hours. They treat it as if it were a loaf of bread that can be sliced, packaged, and stored away. But time is neither a unit of measure nor a straight line. Time is actually a vast, shoreless, and ever-moving ocean. We humans are merely passengers drifting in small rowboats in the middle of that ocean. Sometimes the waters are still. Days flow as slowly and sweetly as honey. Sometimes a storm breaks. Years pass as quickly as a flash of lightning, capsizing us. However, for 7-year-old Leo, time was neither an ocean nor a clock. For Leo, time meant dust. Golden specks of dust dancing in the sunlight, smelling of old wood. Leo's entire universe was that shop standing where the cobblestones ended on the town's oldest, narrowest, and shadiest street, its sign wiped blank by the wind, the Kronos watchmaker. This was not just a shop. This was his grandfather Silas's kingdom, and for Leo, a magical forest waiting to be explored. When you stepped through the shop door, you left the outside world, that noisy, metallic, hurried world of the modern age, behind. Inside, the air was heavier, more viscous. The scents of cedar, century-old oak furniture, fine machine oil, and dried lavender mingled together. This scent was the very essence of the past. The walls of the shop were covered with clocks from floor to ceiling. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of them. Each one from a different country, a different time, standing guard like tired but loyal soldiers. In the corner stood a massive grandfather clock carved from mahogany, adorned with dragon figures. Leo had named it the General. Its voice was so resonant and deep that every hour, when it struck the gong, Leo's chest would vibrate, and the dust in the shop would jump in the air. Just above the counter hung a delicate, porcelain Swiss cuckoo clock. It was like the shop's gossip, chirping with its shrill voice every 15 minutes, as if rushing to announce to everyone how quickly time was passing. And then there were the pocket watches, shy little gentlemen and ladies sleeping in velvet trays, with silver and gold lids. Grandpa Silas was the conductor of this orchestra. He was the oldest, wisest, and most patient man in town. His hair was as white and shiny as the silver watch covers in the shop. His face was full of deep lines like a dried-up riverbed, but each of those lines had been earned with a smile. His hands— ah, those hands! His fingers were knobby, like a farmer's who had picked olives and worked the soil for years. While holding a tea glass or turning the morning paper, those hands would tremble like autumn leaves. Leo would sometimes watch those hands with worry, afraid his grandfather would spill his tea. But miraculously, whenever Grandpa Silas sat at his workbench, screwed that monocle into his eye, and picked up a screwdriver thinner than a hair, the trembling would stop as if cut by a knife. In that moment, those old hands would transform into the hands of the world's most precise surgeon. Leo would climb onto the high swivel stool next to his grandfather, dangling his feet in the void, and watch him for hours. This was their silent ritual. Outside, children played ball, shouted, and ran around. But this was Leo's game. He was watching time being repaired. One day, Grandpa Silas paused while directing the complex dance of brass gears. He was holding a microscopic spring with his tweezers. He turned to Leo, looked over his glasses with that warm gaze, and whispered, "Look, Leo! Do you see this tiny spring? People think the heart of a watch is the battery, or the mainspring. But no. The soul of the watch lies in this balanced spring. It is thinner than a strand of hair, yet the power that commands all those massive wheels and heavy hands lies here. This is called the breath, son." Leo leaned in curiously, his nose almost touching the workbench. "Why breath, Grandpa?" he asked. Silas smiled. "Because," he said, "if you wind this spring too tight, the watch cannot breathe. It suffocates. It panics. It starts to run, showing time faster than it is, and eventually its heart stops. If you leave it too loose, this time it becomes lazy. It goes numb. It falls behind life. People are like this too, my little lion. You must neither rush too much nor fall too far behind. You must find your own breath, your own rhythm. Life is not about rushing to a destination, but savoring every step taken on that path. These lessons were like invisible tattoos etched into Leo's soul. Time did not pass in that shop. Time was hosted there, entertained as a guest. Every second spent with Grandpa Silas was as long and precious as eternity. However, there was a bitter truth in Leo's innocent world that he did not yet know. Time, no matter how well hosted, did not like hospitality. Time was an ungrateful, cold guest who eventually left every house it entered, dragging the host along with it when it departed. No one heard the thief's arrival. The door didn't creak, the windows weren't forced. It entered their lives slowly, on tiptoe, like an insidious fog. The first signs were so small they were no different from a speck of dust. Grandpa Silas forgot that simple movement he had done every evening for 50 years while closing the shop, locking the door, and putting the key in his pocket. One morning when they arrived, the door was wide open. Leo attributed it to the wind. His grandfather just laughed. "Old age, they haven't left me a brain," and brushed it off. But then, those little forgetfulnesses became frequent. One day, while holding his favorite magnifying glass, he searched for it for hours. "Where is my eye, Leo? Someone stole my eye!" he panicked, tearing the place apart. When Leo showed him the magnifying glass in his hand, the expression of confusion and fear on Grandpa Silas's face sat in Leo's stomach like a stone. The rail break happened on a rainy afternoon. Mrs. Higgins, the town baker, entered the shop. She and Grandpa Silas had been friends for 40 years. When Mrs. Higgins walked in with fresh cinnamon buns, Grandpa Silas looked up from the counter, smiled, and said, "Good morning, Martha. How are the children?" Mrs. Higgins froze. It was as if the sound of hundreds of clocks in the shop had suddenly been cut. Because Martha was Silas's wife, whom he had buried 20 years ago. She was the grandmother Leo had never known. Grandpa Silas thought the woman in front of him was his dead wife. Mrs. Higgins, eyes filling with tears, said, "It's me, Silas. I'm Sarah, the baker." The fog in Grandpa Silas's eyes lifted for a moment. His face turned bright red. His hands began to tremble with shame. Of course, Sarah. God, where is my mind? The light hit the wrong way." Yes, it was the light. Leo understood that day that his grandfather was lying. It wasn't the light. It was because of the fog. Grandpa Silas's mind was a magnificent library. A massive archive containing thousands of books, memories, faces, and names. But now, an invisible, silent thief had entered that library. The thief came every night, wandered among the shelves, pulled a random book, and destroyed it. Sometimes he stole an insignificant memory, sometimes a name, sometimes a face. And the most frightening part was that the librarian, Grandpa Silas, wasn't even aware of which shelves were emptying. As months passed, the fog thickened. Silas could no longer go down to the shop. Those master hands now struggled even to hold a fork. He spent his days sitting in the old velvet armchair in front of the upstairs window. His eyes stared at the street outside, but what he saw was not the street. They were pathways lost within his own mind. Words began to abandon him too. He would stop in the middle of sentences, staring into the void as if trying to catch a word hanging in the air. "Give me that thing, Leo," he would say. "You know, the round thing we drink water from." "The glass, Grandpa?" Leo would say, his heart squeezing. "Yes. Glass. Was that its name?" And then that terrible Tuesday arrived. When Leo ran home from school, he found his grandfather in the middle of the workshop. The floor was littered with the metal parts of a smashed clock. His grandfather was kneeling on the floor, trying to gather the pieces with trembling hands. But he was crying. That strong mountain of a man was sobbing like a small child. Leo ran to him. "Grandpa! What happened? Are you hurt?" he shouted. Silas raised his head. There was a void in his eyes that Leo had never seen before. A void as dark and desolate as the bottom of the ocean. He looked at Leo's face, looked, and then asked that question that shattered Leo's heart into 1,000 pieces. "Excuse me, young man. Where is my mother? I can't find my home. It's very dark here." The world stopped. All the clocks in the shop fell silent. Leo couldn't breathe. His grandfather had forgotten him. Not just him, but his adulthood, his life, this shop. He had forgotten everything. The thief had burned the library to ash. Leo managed to whisper, "Grandpa. It's me. Leo. Your grandson. This is your home." The fog in Silas's eyes parted for a moment, a very brief moment. A light of recognition flickered. "Leo?" he said with a weak voice. Then he hugged Leo. He hugged him so tight, as if holding on to keep from falling off a cliff. "I'm scared, Leo," the old man whispered. "There are holes in my mind. Everything is flowing away. I can't hold on to you." That night, Leo couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling and listened for the footsteps of the thief. The time thief was stealing his grandfather piece by piece, cell by cell. Leo clenched his fists against the darkness. He had to do something. He couldn't stop time. Even if he smashed the clocks, the sun continued to rise and set. He couldn't fight time. But maybe he could cheat. Maybe he could go behind time's back and take back what the thief had stolen, or hide them in a safe place before the thief arrived. The next morning, Leo woke up with a mission. He got out of bed with the discipline of a soldier. He raided the house's pantry. His mother's old jam jars, his father's pickle jars, empty medicine bottles, coffee tins with metal lids. He carried anything with a tight lid that was airtight to his room. He washed them all with soapy water, rinsed them, dried them. The glass was so clean it was almost invisible in the light. Leo had decided to become a collector. But not of stamps, stones, or seashells. He was going to collect moments. Before the thief arrived, he would trap his grandfather's most precious, real moments in these jars and keep them forever. When Grandpa Silas forgot everything, Leo would open these jars like potions and give his grandfather back who he was. That was the plan. It seemed perfect. His heart pounded with excitement as he went on his first hunt. It was a Wednesday morning. They were having breakfast in the kitchen. Outside, a gray, melancholy rain was falling, but inside the kitchen was warm. The smell of toast filled the room. On a crackling station on the radio, an old jazz track was playing with the misty sound of a saxophone. Grandpa Silas was in good spirits that morning. The fog seemed to have lifted a bit. He took a sip of his tea, looked at Leo, and let out one of his famous, belly-shaking laughs that rang through the room. "Ha! Do you remember, Leo?" he boomed. "How your father was covered in mud when he fell off that bike. He looked just like a chocolate cake." That was the moment. That laugh. Pure, unadulterated joy. It was more valuable than all the gold in the world. Leo didn't hesitate. He pulled a medium-sized, old honey jar he had prepared from under the table. He silently twisted off the lid. He held it towards his grandfather. As if trying to catch the invisible vibrations in the air, the energy of that laughter, he waved his hand in the air, sweeping it into the jar. And quickly, click, he closed the lid. He tightened it hard. He pressed the jar to his chest. There was nothing visible inside. Just emptiness and air. But Leo knew. His grandfather's laugh was in there. He had trapped that moment, that joy, inside the glass. The thief couldn't take it now. He ran to his room and stuck a label on the jar in shaky handwriting. "Grandpa's most beautiful laugh, rainy Wednesday." This was just the beginning. As days passed, Leo's room turned into the world's strangest and most secret museum. The shelves, his desk, under his bed, inside the closet. Everywhere was filled with glass jars. To an outsider, it was a mad sight. Hundreds of empty jars. But for Leo, it was a priceless treasury. Leo was now like a hunter. He was always on alert. One day, they went to the riverbank outside of town with his grandfather. The water rippled over the stones. Birds were singing. The wind whistled through the reeds. Grandpa Silas had closed his eyes, turned his face to the sun, and was smiling peacefully. Leo immediately pulled out a small blue-lidded bottle. He trapped the sound of the river, the whisper of the wind, and his grandfather's peace in that bottle. He wrote on the label, "Peace by the riverside and sunshine." Another day, passing by the town bakery, the dizzying scent of fresh-baked cookies spilled into the street. His grandfather took a deep breath. "Ah," he said. "This is the smell of happiness, Leo." Leo pulled out a tall spaghetti jar and sealed that scent, that moment. Label: "Scent of warm cookies and happiness." In a large, pot-bellied pickle jar he trapped the famous story of the town square clock tower that his grandfather told. He kept the jar open while his grandfather told the story, and the moment he said, "And they lived happily ever after," he closed the lid. When the first snow fell, he used a thin, tall perfume bottle to capture that absolute, cotton-like silence outside by opening his window at midnight. Leo felt powerful. He had a weapon against the thief now. Whenever his grandfather forgot something, Leo looked at his room and smiled. "It's okay," he said to himself. "I saved them all. They are all safe." However, as Leo filled the jars, Grandpa Silas emptied out. The fog was no longer lifting. Grandpa no longer went down to the shop at all. He spent his days in that armchair by the window, a blanket pulled over him, staring at the gray sky outside. His gaze had become dull. His movements slowed like an old toy with a dying battery. Sometimes he looked at Leo but didn't recognize him. "Who are you, child?" he would ask. "Did you bring the shuttle?" Every time, with a new crack in his heart, Leo would say, "It's me, Grandpa Leo." Then he would run to his room, looking at his jars for consolation. "Almost there," he would say. "When the time comes, I will open them all." And then, the great storm arrived. It was late November. The sky seemed to have declared war on the earth. The clouds were the color of lead and hung so low it felt like you could touch them if you reached out. In the late afternoon, the wind began to howl. It punched the wooden walls of the old watchmaker's shop, rattled the windows, demanding to get inside. The trees bowed in fear. And suddenly, with a terrifying noise, snap! All the lights in the city went out. The shop was plunged into pitch-black, dense darkness. Only the pale, ghostly blue light of lightning illuminated the room at intervals of seconds, turning the shadows of the clocks inside into monsters. Leo went down to the living room holding a trembling candle. The stairs creaked. His heart was beating in his throat. Grandpa Silas was in his armchair. But this time it was different. Very different. He was shaking. Not because he was cold. Because he was in terror. He was rocking back and forth, his hands covering his face. Leo approached. The candlelight revealed the deep lines on his grandfather's face, that map of fear. "Where is this place?" Silas moaned. His voice was not that of an 80-year-old man, but of a 5-year-old child lost in the dark. Thin, frail, and helpless. "Why is it so dark? Where is my mother? I want my mother. I want to go home." Leo's blood ran cold. This wasn't simple forgetfulness. His grandfather hadn't just forgotten today. He had forgotten his adulthood, his wife, his grandson, his entire life. The thief had completely emptied the library. Only a scared little boy remained. "No," said Leo. "No, not now. Please, Grandpa." He was panicked. The absolute emptiness in his grandfather's eyes, that unfamiliar look, terrified Leo. He knew what he had to do. The time had come. It was time to use that magnificent treasure he had prepared, his final trump card. "Wait! Wait, Grandpa!" Leo shouted, his voice trying to drown out the storm. "I'll bring you back. Don't be afraid. I saved everything. I will save you." He ran upstairs to his room. The shelves gleamed in the flickering candlelight. Hundreds of jars looked back at him. He grabbed as many as he could carry in his arms. The most important ones. The most beautiful laugh. The cookie scent. Peace by the riverside. The clock tower story. He clamped them all within his arms. The glass clinked against each other. He almost fell coming down the stairs. Leo lined the jars up in front of his grandfather, like setting a sacred table. His hands were shaking. "Look, Grandpa," he said breathlessly. "I kept them all for you. Look, now you will remember. I will give them all back to you." He took the largest jar, that honey jar labeled Grandpa's most beautiful laugh. "Listen to this, Grandpa. This is you. When you were happy. Remember that rainy day." With great hope, he twisted the lid. Leo waited. He waited for his grandfather's loud, warm laughter to fill the room, to tear through the darkness. He closed his eyes, ready to hear that voice. But no sound came from the jar. Only the stale, cold, lifeless air inside leaked out. A small hiss sound. That was all. Leo opened his eyes. He shook the jar. He held it to his ear. Silence. Absolute, cruel silence. "No," he whispered. "It can't be." He grabbed the other jar. Scent of cookies. He ripped the lid open. Held it to his nose. He took a deep breath. But there was no cookie. There was no cinnamon. There was only the smell of dust and glass. That moment was dead. Leo went berserk. In a panic, he started opening them all one by one. Pew-pee-pew-pee-pop. Lids flew onto the floor, rolling across the floorboards. "Come out!" He screamed at the jars, his voice tearful. "Come out! Remind him! Come back!" There was no river sound. No story. No peace. The moments were gone. Those jars were empty. They had all been just glass from the start. Leo understood the truth right then, on that cold floor, in the flickering shadow of the candlelight. And this truth burned him like a physical blow. A memory was like a butterfly. If you catch it and put it in a jar, yes, its body stays there, but the dust of its wings falls off, its colors fade, and it dies. A laugh was alive only in the second it was laughed. A scent was beautiful only in the moment it rose from the oven. You couldn't keep them. You couldn't freeze them. You couldn't own them. Empty. Leo sobbed. He collapsed onto his knees. "They're all empty. I failed, Grandpa. I couldn't save you. The thief won." Leo threw the last jar in his hand onto the floor with anger and despair. Crash. The jar shattered into thousands of pieces. The sound drowned out even the thunder outside. The shards of glass scattered over the carpet like the wreckage of Leo's dreams. Leo buried his face in his hands and began to cry, sobbing and shaking. As Leo cried, he felt a weight on his hair. A hand. A trembling, calloused, warm hand. He lifted his head. Grandpa Silas, not in that scared child state, but like a shadow, had quietly risen from his chair and crouched down on the floor next to Leo, among the broken glass. In the candlelight, his face was different. That expression of terror was gone. That child saying, "I want my mother," was gone. Even if the fog hadn't completely lifted, it had parted for a moment with a miraculous clarity. In his eyes was that old light Leo knew. Grandpa Silas picked up a piece of broken glass from the floor. He held it to the light. Its sharp edge glinted in the candle flame. "You tried to catch the wind, didn't you, little lion?" he asked. His voice was weak, but the wisdom within it had returned. "So I wouldn't forget you," said Leo, tears streaming down his cheeks. "So you wouldn't forget yourself. I wanted to stop time." Silas smiled. This smile wasn't loud like the laugh in that jar. It was weak, fragile, sad, but it was there. And it was alive. He slowly placed his hand on Leo's chest, over his heart. "Leo, listen to me," he whispered. "Memories don't go into jars, son. They are like birds, they fly away. If you put them in a cage, they won't sing. You can't hold them." Then he pointed to the candle on the floor. Look at that candle. This flame. It wasn't burning yesterday. It won't burn tomorrow either. It is burning only right now. If you try to take this flame and put it in your pocket, to save it, what happens? It goes out. And it burns your hand. You can only watch it. You can only feel its warmth right now. Leo sniffled. But I don't want you to go, he said. Silas pulled Leo to him. He hugged his grandson tightly with those weak arms. Defying the cold of the room, the warmth of his grandfather's old wool sweater enveloped Leo. He smelled cedar, machine oil, and lavender. This time the scent came not from a jar, but directly from the source, from his grandfather's chest. I might forget my name tomorrow, Leo, Silas whispered, resting his chin on his grandson's head. I might forget this house, these clocks, even your face. This is not in my hands. But right now, at this exact second, I smell your hair. I hear your little heart beating with mine. And I know how much I love you. This moment. This hug. No thief can steal this. Because we are not putting this moment in a jar. We are living this moment. We don't save it, Leo, we spend it. Just like a breath. You breathe it in and you let it go. Leo stopped crying. He hugged his grandfather tighter. He closed his eyes. He was no longer trying to capture that moment, to force it into his mind, or stuff it in a bottle. He was just there. Completely there. He heard the rain hitting the glass outside. He heard the crackle of the candle wick. He heard his grandfather's raspy but peaceful breathing. And he understood. Time was not an enemy. Time was not a monster to be defeated. Time was just an infinite. Now. And the most precious moments were not those saved, but those shared. That night, until the storm subsided and the candle burned out, they sat on the floor among the broken glass, just hugging each other. They didn't speak at all. Because sometimes words could break the magic of the moment. Silence told more than anything that could be said. Grandpa Silas left that winter, along with the last leaf of the oak tree in the garden. Quietly, in his sleep, peacefully like a stopped clock. Leo grew up. Years passed. That little boy became a man with broad shoulders and calloused hands. He became a watchmaker like his grandfather. He repainted the sign of the Kronos watchmaker. But his shop was different from the others. There were no cameras in Leo's shop. There were no memory jars or scrapbooks on his shelves. When the sky was painted red in the late afternoon, and there was a beautiful sunset, Leo would drop his work, go to the door of the shop, and just watch. He would watch the changing colors until the sun went down. He wouldn't take a picture of it. When a child entered the shop and laughed with joy, Leo wouldn't try to record that sound. He would laugh along with the child. He would join that joy. Because Leo had solved the greatest legacy, the secret his grandfather had left him. Life was not a collection to be stored on dusty shelves. Life was a sip of water to be drunk to the last drop, breathlessly and without fear. And if you were truly lucky, if you opened your heart and eyes wide, some moments would build a nest in the deepest corner of your soul on their own, even if you didn't try to force them to stay. Just like that hug in the candlelight on that stormy night. That moment was still burning inside Leo. And it would burn forever.